The episode starts with the friends having a good time at the Clam. Cleveland asks if Jerome serves desserts because he's got a real hankering for pudding. Joe also says he was just thinking about pudding on his way to the Clam. Peter says he too could go for pudding. Quagmire tells them it might be that new billboard advertising pudding on the highway as they all drove past it on their way. Peter suggests they should go check it out. Joe supports the idea. The friends go to the billboard. Peter tells them that's real pudding in there. Quagmire says it isn't, and Joe also says they wouldn't put real pudding on a billboard. Peter replies to Joe, asking if he knows how crippled he sounds.
Do you have any idea how crippled you sound right now?
And tells them there's only one way to settle their debate. Peter goes on to climb the billboard. Finally getting up there, Peter slips and falls into the bowl on the billboard. Quagmire asks if he is alright. Peter says there's no pudding but he found a kid in there. Joe exclaims, saying it's the lost kid who has been missing for a week and tells Peter to stay put. Joe calls for a crew to come help them get down. The crew finally arrives and helps them get down. The boy's family gets in touch and thanks Peter for finding him. The mayor celebrates Peter for his heroism in helping to rescue the boy and hands over the city key to Peter, telling him he shouldn't forget to water the plants every day. Peter thanks Mayor West and goes on to give his speech, telling the crowd how some of them are calling him a hero and others calling him a hoagie. Peter says what he's just trying to say is that he's just a man who unintentionally saved kids. The crowd cheers for him as Joe says for the last 20 years on his job, no one has ever cheered for him. Peter continues, saying the fact is when he saved the boy, he wasn't thinking, and he doesn't think, he just does. He only wanted to see if the billboard had real pudding in it, and now he's a hero. They shouldn't be afraid to do whatever and shouldn't be afraid to hit each other. Joe gets to Peter, asking about what he said about not thinking and just doing stuff, and if he meant that. Peter tells him he was and he will roll with anything. Joe replies, saying he's right, and it's time he does the same thing. Joe calls his chief officer, telling him he's quitting his job. Bonnie asks Joe what he's doing, and Joe tells her they're done because he's leaving her. Joe then shouts in excitement, shooting his gun, and walks away. Peter remarks that he can't remember the last time Joe shot his gun.
Where I am. Yeah, can you hear it? Flying through the air.
At the dinner table, Brian walks in with a new look, and Stewie makes fun of him. Lois expresses her concern about Joe and feels terrible for Bonnie and the kids. Peter reassures Lois that they will be fine and will bounce back. The friends go to meet Joe in his new apartment. Peter knocks on the door, and Joe welcomes them. Peter asks how he's doing and if everything is okay. Joe tells them he's great and invites them to check out his new place. He shows them around, proudly displaying the new things he now has and offers them some candies. Peter mentions that they came over because they were worried about him. Joe replies that he's never been better and admits that he's been living his life all wrong, but not anymore. He's done with overthinking and is just focused on living. Peter tells him he made the right choice and that he hasn't seen anyone as happy as Joe in a long time. Joe walks into the Clam with a suitcase, and Peter asks what's with the suitcase. Joe reveals that he has a surprise and suggests a road trip. The friends express their interest, and Peter asks where they'll be going. Joe suggests Niagara Falls. Peter comments that Niagara Falls is for lovers, but Joe tells him it's for everybody. On their way, Joe spots some cattle ahead and suggests tipping them over. Excited, Joe reaches the cow and pushes it. Peter jokes that he wants to kiss the cow but doesn't want it to be his idea.
Peter, you should kiss that cow.
All right, Peter, that was fortuitous, but play it cool. Oh, Cleveland, I couldn't.
Okay, Quagmire, you should kiss that cow.
Sure, why not?
Ah!
At the motel, Joe walks in with some friends as the others are sleeping, waking them up. Quagmire questions Joe about what he's doing, and Joe tells him he went to a high school kegger party and made some friends. Quagmire reminds Joe that it's 3 in the morning and they're trying to get some sleep. Joe dismisses them as lame and mentions they're going to smoke something called croak. Finally, the friends arrive at the waterfalls. Joe takes a close look at the falls from the edge. Quagmire tells Peter that the falls are so beautiful up close. Peter mentions that Lois always dreamt about coming to the waterfalls, and now he knows why. He reveals that she had even been saving money for it, and throws the money into the falls, insisting that Lois has finally made it. Joe remarks that he told them the place was magnificent, and the perfect place to end it all. He says his goodbyes to his friends and jumps into the abyss of the falls, leaving his friends in shock. Quagmire exclaims that Joe has killed himself, and Cleveland says it makes no sense. Joe shouts from below, and the friends move closer. Quagmire gasps and asks Joe if he's alive. Peter asks if he's alright, and Joe replies saying he's not sure. Quagmire tells him to hang in there and assures him that they'll get some help. Joe tells them no and says they should just let him die. He reminds Joe of the day he supported Peter when he wore Lois jeans.
Peter, you know you're wearing...
I know, I think there was a mix-up.
Joe is eventually brought up from the falls. Peter asks what's wrong with him and why he would try to kill himself. Joe replies saying he feels worthless. Quagmire mentions that Joe seemed so happy in the past few days. Joe tells them that when he saw Peter becoming a hero, it reminded him of all the things he can't do. He feels like a cop who can't save anyone and a husband in a loveless marriage. Joe continues, expressing that his life is a joke, and as soon as he decided to kill himself, he actually felt free. He sees it as finally being able to say goodbye to this worthless life. Cleveland expresses disbelief that the whole point of bringing them to Niagara Falls was for Joe to kill himself. Joe apologizes for tricking them into coming and explains that he just wanted to spend his last week with his best pals. Peter tells him there are plenty of reasons to live, like his handsome looks. Cleveland interjects, saying he doesn't think Joe is handsome, and they all start giving their reasons why Joe should live. In a moment of impulsiveness, Joe jumps into the falls again, but he is saved for the second time. They take Joe back to the hotel and have him tied up. Joe asks for his wheelchair, but Quagmire refuses, as they can't trust him not to harm himself. Peter suggests taking him back to Quahog to get some help. However, Peter insists that they can't leave Niagara Falls without riding the Maid of the Mist. Quagmire talks about how fun the day has been, and Joe admits that the beauty of the place is actually making him feel much better. He asks his friends if they wouldn't mind opening the door for a little breeze. Peter opened the door, and Joe, who was tied up, broke free and tried to jump off. Quagmire tried to stop him, but it put too much pressure on the cables, causing them to snap.
I don't regret it, the breeze is nice.
Peter, Cleveland, and Quagmire were thrown out, but Peter managed to hold on. Joe tried to reach Peter, but another cable snapped, causing Peter to lose his grip and fall into the water. They found it difficult to swim due to the turbulent water. Joe reassured them that he was coming, and they shouldn't worry. Joe slid down the cable with his chair as his friends approached the edge of the fall. He reached the gondola station and headed to save his friends. Peter told them to keep swallowing water, believing they could drink their way out. On the other side, Joe continued his chase and spotted a tree near the edge of the fall. He got close and jumped off his chair onto the tree. Peter and the others got closer, and Joe instructed them to grab onto his legs. They held on as Joe made his way to safety. Peter thanked Joe and expressed his belief that he thought he was going to die and even pictured his own funeral. The crowd cheered for Joe, and Quagmire praised him for his incredible actions. Joe admitted that he had spent the whole time trying to kill himself, but seeing his friends almost die made him realize that life was truly worth living. Peter told Joe that he was a hero too and that he wouldn't trade him for any friend in the world. Joe thanked Peter and expressed how lucky he was to have them in his life. Joe then started singing a song, and they all joined in. Quagmire suggested that they shouldn't sing anything until they got home to record the song. Peter interrupted with a song that made Joe forget what he was singing.
I'm a Barbie girl in a Barbie world. Come on, Barbie, let's go party.
They made it back to the Clam, and Quagmire mentioned that it was a strange experience, but he was glad they went. Cleveland proudly declared he was the first black man to visit Niagara Falls. Joe showed up in his uniform, announcing that he had gotten his job back. Cleveland asked about Bonnie, and Joe replied that he had a plan for that. He explained that he had hired some guys to come to the house on Tuesday and stage an assault, and then he would come in and save her. He believed that Bonnie would be grateful and take him back. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed the episode, consider subscribing for more entertaining content.